So good morning and welcome to the P2P Orders Virtual Instructor-Led Training. We are happy to have you all here to go over this topic and do some refreshers and cover some information that was maybe covered in your self-paced training that was part of the orders section in the Learning Management System hosted by our awesome Virginia Institute of Procurement team. So welcome, and hopefully you will find this as a great resource to also have and take with you, and you'll feel a little bit better about seeing the actual demos in the system. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Lewis. I am the training lead and also the P2P lead with our fantastic eVA team. I am excited to be training you and excited to help you learn and really embrace this new platform that I think is really, really great. So a couple of Zoom reminders today. So today's session is a webinar, and we want to make sure that we are answering your questions. So please remember that just like in our bug sessions, we want to make sure that anything that is not a question goes in the chat and anything that is goes in the question and answer. Because these sessions are relatively quick, I can't guarantee that if you put a question in the chat that it will be answered. So please, 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 if you have a question, please use that Q&A function and not the chat. But we do have the chat for, you'll see momentarily that we have some poll questions, and there's even one that's that's open for you to type something in. So that's what we want to use those chats for. So just think anything that's not a question, chat, and if you have a question, question and answer. Just want to remind everybody of that so that we can make sure that we answer all of your questions today. So that brings us to our first poll. Which of these describes your role in the eVA platform? And I am going to go ahead and launch this poll. And you can pick multiple options. I know that this is a mock training session, so just pretend which one you would like to be, and if it's multiple, that's great too. And I will just wait until we get a little above 75%. And then I will share the results. This allows me to see who the audience is today. Are we requisitioners? Are we approvers, managers? Are we part of the admin team? And I'm going to go ahead and share this poll because we're almost at that 100%. So you can see that a lot of us are requisitioners and approvers, managers, admin. You might be one or all of those. It just depends, but we have a pretty good mix of everybody today. So this will allow me to speak to these specific audiences and make sure that you are getting information that you need in order to be successful in your daily duties in the new platform. So thank you everyone for that. I'm going to stop sharing and we are going to go into one additional poll. So I want to know what your confidence level is on this particular topic. Are you super confident? Are you kind of in the middle, or do you have low confidence in the topic of orders, P2P orders procured to pay, for those who do not know, in the new platform? So I'm going to go ahead and launch this, and this will allow me to see how you're feeling going into this particular virtual instructor-led training. And what I'm hoping is that by the end of this session, that if you are on the low side or the medium, we could kind of bump you up to the high, and that your confidence level is a little bit higher. What I will say is there's no right or wrong answer here. You could be at a high level of confidence, but you could also be on the other end. All totally fine. We just want to make sure that we are all continuing to learn, and there's no expectation at the beginning that you should know everything. So I'm going to end this poll and share the results. Most of you are in that medium section. Normally that's where I place myself because I'm never I'm never going to say, yes, I'm 100% confident. So totally normal. A couple of you are in that low section and a couple of you are in the high. As I said, there's no right or wrong answer here. I really just want to see how everybody's feeling. And I'm hoping that maybe some of those low and mediums can go up to high. But if they don't, that's fine too. Training is around and will continue to be around after our go live. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And then lastly, I want to hear, what do you hope to take away from this session? So feel free to put that in the chat. It can be a word or two. It doesn't have to be anything that is overly complicated or overly descriptive. Maybe it's just more knowledge. Maybe it's seeing the tool in action as we go through demos. Awesome. Kimberly said more confidence in functionality, approval workflows. So a lot of those topics too, or I should say the approval workflows, we did discuss that a little bit in the requisition session. So absolutely make sure you sign up for those if you have not. And we definitely cover a little bit more of that workflow in the requisition section. So just wanted to let everybody know about that. Confidence, you want to build more confidence. Gary, I love it. You want to become an expert. That's where we all want to be, right? We want to get up to that level where we are feeling as confident as the new platform as we do in the current platform. And I think we can all get there. It might not be overnight, but as I said, training will be here. So thanks everybody for letting me know what you want to take away from this session. What that helps me make sure that I know what your expectations are and that if I can meet them, and if I can't, how can we get you that information that you need? So thank you, thank you, thank you. So now we're going to just go over a brief agenda of how this session will go today. First, I'm going to do a quick recap of the self-paced training that you have already participated in the LMS that goes along with the multiple learning pathways that orders falls under. So I'll do a quick information recap for that. Then we're going to do a live follow along demo where I will share my screen and you can see the the testing environment, which we're also kind of using as a training environment right now. And we will basically get to see everything that we discussed in the recap in action during that live follow along demo. I've left a lot of time for questions. For those who have questions, we'll do that during the question and answer session. There might be some questions that we can't answer, and that's not a problem. We will absolutely make sure we take that back to the person who can answer it and get you an answer to your questions. But again, making sure that we set those expectations that not even the trainers don't know everything, but we will make sure we get you the information that you need. And finally, next steps. So we will talk about what is available to you after this training and how you can continue to learn and gain that confidence that a lot of you are looking for in the new platform. So without any further ado, let's get into the meat of our presentation here. And I'm gonna just do a little bit of minimizing for me so I can see my screen a little bit better. So first, we're going to go over that P2P order process. We're going to briefly touch on confirming orders. Then we will talk about change orders, and then also receiving and returning an order. Now, what we will go over in the live demo is we'll do a change order, we'll receive an order, and we will return an order. And then I'll also be happy to show you how you can create confirming orders. It is basically just an option that you select in the system, and I will go over that as well. So hopefully this is all going to be things that you can take with you as you continue to gain confidence. So first of all, let's go over to the P2P order process. So after a requisition is fully approved, the status changes to ordered, similar to how it is done in the current platform. Then the order is created and it's shared with the supplier. These are orders that are not the confirming orders. Suppliers will still get those. They just won't be notified that there is a need, since the understanding of a confirming order, at least for the purposes of today, more for documentation purposes. So I do just want to point that out. So the order is created, it's shared with the supplier. The supplier has the option to send an advanced shipping notice. This is not something that is required for them, though. So it is optional. They have the option to do it. The great thing about it is if they do send that advanced shipping notice, it creates a receipt shell, which is really nice. So it basically sets up that receipt for you so that there's less work you have to do on your end. But I will say, even if they don't send that shipping notice, it's relatively easy to go in and make that receipt shell, and we will talk about that. Then finally, if they have sent the advanced shipping notice, they being the supplier, or if they haven't, we still want to make sure that we go in and are receiving that item and creating a receipt in the system. So this kind of gives you a high level overview of how that P2P order process works. And this should be familiar to all of you, as this topic and this process was discussed in your self-paced training. So confirming orders. Most of these are going to be buyer facing. They're for documentation purposes. And as I mentioned, the suppliers do not receive a notification. However, it will still be available for them to access, but since it's more for documentation purposes, we're not saying, hey, supplier, you need to send this out right away. It's more for documenting what that purchase was so that we can make sure that it's captured and that it's something that we can even pull reports on in the future. So that's what I want you to keep in mind about confirming orders. And as I said, once we get to the demo portion of this, I will be able to show you how to create a confirming order as opposed to a regular order that is external facing. Change orders. So the big thing that is the difference in the new platform is that change orders start from the order and not the requisition. So I grabbed this screenshot here so you can see that we are in an order and there is that change order button. It's going to be easy to remember because if you go to the requisition to try to do a change order, you will not see that button. So that is why I am pointing that out right here. So remember that change orders in the new platform start from that order and not from the requisition. The other change about change orders is that you will be asked to provide information about the change prior to making it. So I grabbed this little screenshot here, and we will also look at it in the demo environment, but you can see here that first of all, it asks you, is it's a significant change request. Here's what I'll tell you is you don't have to do any work there, because for the moment and for the foreseeable future, until we all get a little more comfortable in the system, this will automatically be defaulted to yes, and it's not something that you can change. You can see that it's grayed out, so you won't be able to move that radio button to no. So that will already be pre-selected for you. You then have the amendment number or the change order number. So if this is the first change on that particular order, you'll see a 1. If it's the second, you'll see a 2, and so on and so forth. That is also something that is defaulted in the system and that you won't be able to change. But I like to look at it as another thing that you don't have to worry about filling in. The two things that you do need to fill in, one being required and one being optional, is the change types, and we will look at that in the system. So you'll use the drop down for that. I think off the top of my head, I can't remember how many options there are, but as I said, we'll take a look in the system. And then a brief description of the changes. While that's not required, it's usually helpful to put in there, why are you making this change? What is the change? So that anybody that looks at it, especially those approvers, can make sure that they know what was changed on that particular order. So those are the two big changes with creating change orders in the new platform. But we will also go over that, as I mentioned, during our demo portion. Receiving an order. So we have receiving an order, but also returning an order. So I want to talk about first where you should go to do these different actions. So receiving an order, as you all know, is used when items or services are received, and you can start that receipt from an order. You might also have a supplier that already sent an advanced shipping notice and a shell has been created, but you can always go to that order to create the receipt. So just like where you go to make the change order, which would be on the order and not the requisition level, you want to make sure that you're going to that order level to start that receipt. And I have that information listed here. Now, returning an order is used to document a return in case something was damaged when you received it, and those start from the receipt. So if you think about it this way, they're kind of both receipts in the sense that you are saying, here's what I received, but I'm sending back. So receipt is started from an order, and then that return is started from the receipt that you already had. So if you think about it in the sense that if you go to a grocery store and you purchase some items and you have received it and you receive a receipt for that, you will then, if you notice that, let's say your milk jug has a hole in it, so you need to return it. Well, you have that receipt now, and you can say, I need to return this item, it was damaged. I know receiving can be one of those nuanced things, especially in the current platform, and I think it's a little bit clearer in the iValuable platform, and I think it is something that will really help that understanding. But I do know it can be a little complicated, and I'm hoping that the demos that we'll go over today will help you to understand that even further. So this is kind of a throwback to your self-paced training. And I just want someone to put in the chat, how would you navigate to see the order details of an order that has already been created from a requisition that you created? Which of the tabs at the top would you go to? Anybody, feel free to put it in the chat where you would go to view order details. Yes, Kimberly, that is exactly right. Procurement and then browse orders. So even though I didn't go over that today, as I said, it's in your self-paced training. So I just want to make sure that we are all awake and ready to go, because the demo is the next portion of this virtual instructor-led training. So thank you, Kimberly, for that. And let's go into the follow along demo. And we'll first, I want to tell you the scenarios that we're going to go through. The first one is we need to create a change order to increase the quantity on an order of dog biscuits. I like to use fun things that we're purchasing or returning or receiving during the training. Also makes it a little bit later for everybody. So yesterday, I think I used cupcakes, and today we're using dog biscuits and dog beds. So that brings us to the second demo, is that we've received dog beds that we ordered from a supplier, and we have to create a receipt. But then later, we notice that some of the beds are damaged and we need to create a return. So we will go through all three of these, and I'm going to stop sharing my presentation, and I will start sharing my live environment that I already have set up. So this is my homepage, my landing page. As a friendly reminder, you can click on the eVA logo at any time to bring you back to this page. If you can't remember how to get back there, I think that's a really, really easy, great way. You're going to see me turn to my left monitor, because that is where I am sharing the iValuable and the new eVA platform. So apologies for being rude and not facing you and talking to you, but I want to make sure that I am navigating appropriately. So let's go in first to procurement and browse orders, because if you remember, that first demo is that I need to create a change order to increase an order of dog biscuits. So I already know which one mine is because I wrote it down this morning. It's this PO that ends in 3466. So I want to click on that. And then you will see the familiar buttons that we went over previously. And I want to click on change order. And this is really nice too, is that a lot of the times in the new platform, if you hover over a button, it tells you what you're going to do. So this says click to edit the order by making it a new requisition, which after approval will supersede this order. So just in case you're not positive, gives you that little tip there. So once I click on change order, you can see this should look familiar also. There's that significant change request question that is already defaulted to yes. And the amendment, this is the first change I've made to this particular order. So that is why you are seeing a 1. And again, can't click in there and change that. Both of these are defaulted and grayed out, so you don't have to worry about those. I think that's something nice, one less thing to worry about. So change type, what am I doing? I'm going to click on the see all button so you can see the options that are available, and there are 6. So mine today, because we want to increase that quantity, is going to be change existing item quantity or price. And then I will click close, and you can see that it is reflected in there. I also want to mention too that you can select multiple change types if it falls into multiple categories. I am just going to say request from, of course, it's harder to type when you have an audience. Request from manager to increase quantity. I think if I scroll down here, yep, I have 10. From 10 to 20 on each line, just so that is clear. And then as soon as I do that, what you always want to make sure in this new platform is that you're pressing save. It's a good practice. You can make sure that any work that you're doing is saved and you don't have to go back and do it again. So I will click save. And then you will see that it brings up my, basically makes everything else available for me to make the changes that I've just documented that I'm going to make. And you can see here too that there's an amendment request up here, letting you know that this is that change order. So I'm going to go down and make the changes that I need to. In the interest of time, I'm just going to change the quantity on this first one. And remember, we are saving and closing. As a quick reminder, save is just save, and you want to stay on that page and maybe make some additional changes. The other option is save and close. You've made everything you want, made all the changes you want to, and now you're backing out of it. So that gives you a little overview of a change order. And then again, we will want to submit for approval because I have made that change and increased that quantity. And after I submit for approval, it will go through my designated approval flow depending on what entity I'm a part of and what rules are set up. And then once I submit for approval, you can see that it creates that new order. This might have automatically been approved because I'm an admin in the system. You can see it has the -1 after it, meaning that there's been one change to that particular order. So now let's go and do our second part of the demo, which is receiving some dog beds that we ordered from a supplier. So I'm going to go to procurement and browse orders. Here's the other thing you can do that I want to point out is that you can go to the pending receipts portion, which is right under browse orders. That will also bring up a list of orders that need to be received. I believe that it will bring up all of them that are in your particular entity, but I will get some clarification on that since I don't want to tell you incorrectly. That's nice because it lets you know if you have a lot of stuff to receive on which is still pending. But I'm going to go here because I know exactly which one I am looking for. And this is one I created earlier today. Ignore the ship to and the bill to. I know it looks crazy, but this is one, an order I created earlier today for 10 sets of dog beds or dog bedding. So I have received these and I want to go in and create a receipt. And if you notice, it's right next to that change order button. So we're going to click on the create receipt button. And here's what comes up. And it's basically that single receipt header. Remember, just like when you are setting up a requisition, you want to make sure that you hit save after everything, and then the additional information will show up. But before we hit save, let's talk about what we're seeing here on the header. So we have the name, which is the delivery. It defaults to this. You can absolutely change it. It already knows who the supplier is because it's pulling that information from the order that I'm receiving on. You do have the opportunity to enter a delivery reference ID number. It's not something that's required. If you want to put for some reason you have an internal number that you want to put there, that's a great place to put it. And then it also has the delivery date, which defaults to today. But as you can see, you can also go in and click and change that information. This item is also on a contract, and you can see here it's also referencing that. And finally, you also have the ability to click the location where it was received, which would be helpful if you are at an entity where you can receive things at multiple locations. So that is available as well. So there's nothing I really need to add here. I'm going to keep the name the way it is. And then as soon as I hit save, you will see that the rest of the receipt becomes active, and you can start to see some additional options with the buttons at the top. So the way that this is set up in the new platform, I will show you, is if we go to that item that I am receiving, it's already set the quantity to 10, assuming that I am receiving this in full. So that's totally fine, but just know that if for some reason, if I only receive 5 beds, you can absolutely go in there and do partial receiving, but it does default to that full receipt option. So I want to click save and close. So had I not needed to make any changes, had I, let's just say we're doing it in full, I wouldn't have had to go in there, but I did want to show you guys that you can change the quantity of what you're receiving if you're receiving it in multiple rounds of shipping. So then all you have to do is click submit. And this box will pop up. It's something that we will eventually be doing as far as reviewing our suppliers, but for now, don't worry about it, and you can click the X box. I should call it something different so you don't get confused with the gaming console, but you can click out of that, and I think that is also in your self-paced training as well. So not something you need to worry about right now. So I'm going to go navigate out of this. I'm going to go to browse receipts because we're going to pretend that the receipt that we just created, that it's now been 2 weeks and we've had a chance to look at the beds and we've realized that there are some that are damaged. So we need to create a return. So we will pretend that we are in the future and go back into this receipt that I just created. And we want to create a return, and we want to return 2 of the beds because they were damaged. So all we would do is click on create return, and you can see it's very similar to that receipt page that we already went over. So you do have the option to name it, put in a return reference if you need that. It does already pull in the supplier, the order, and the contract. The shipping date, or in this case, it would be the return date, defaults to today. But I don't need to change anything, and I'm going to go ahead and click save because what I want to change is what I am returning in the line item, and I want to return 2 of them. And I know that it says quantity to receive, but remember, we are creating a return. iValua looks at returns also as a form of receipts, so that's why you're not necessarily seeing the same language consistent through all of the pages. So I want to return 2, and I'm going to hit save and close. Then this is where the return is going to be a little bit different than the receiving. So I am going to schedule the return is the first button that I want to hit, which is kind of like submitting the receipt. It's saying that, yes, I do want to return this item. Then you can hit the confirm shipping. This is something that you'll handle with the supplier about shipping it back or whether they want to pick it up. It really just depends, but you can click confirm shipping. And then finally, you are confirming that you have returned that order and you're confirming that receipt. I know this can be confusing. So what I think might help is if we hop on over to our approval status. You can see this happens a lot in iValua too. It's this great left navigation that you can either expand or make it smaller. We want to go to approval status, and you can see here, this is the workflow for this particular return. So you're saying, yes, I want to return it. Yes, I have made arrangements for shipping it back or for having the supplier pick it up. And yes, I have definitely returned it. So that's why there's a couple more steps on that particular return area. So a little bit different, going to take some getting used to. We'll all go through it together. And hopefully that'll make things a little bit clearer once you get used to it in the new platform. Finally, I want to show you where you can go to create a confirming order. So you go to the same place that you would to create a requisition, which is something we covered in the requisition virtual instructor-led training. So you go to procurement, and under browse requisitions, you would just click on create confirming order as opposed to creating that requisition. So you can see here, it's very similar to the requisition setup, except the type here is listed as confirming order. So it's a little bit different than the way it is in the current platform, where we click on that button and then it puts in the comment at the bottom. But I do think that this is a little bit more intuitive, that you can just create it from the beginning and not have to go into a requisition and then click a box. So again, procurement, and instead of create requisition, create confirming order. That is how you would handle that particular transaction. So I am going to stop sharing, because that brings us to the end of our demo portion. And let me start sharing my presentation again. So now we're going to go into that Q&A portion. So feel free, I know that this is a mock training session, and the learners won't be able to do this when they're in the webinar format, but again, this is an internal mock training session, so feel free to unmute yourself or put anything that you would like to in the chat. Any questions you might have pertaining to, as a reminder, because we're recording what we just went over, if there are any questions about anything. Felicia, I see that you said acknowledgement is spelled incorrectly. Thank you for letting me know that. I'm assuming that you saw that in the platform. And if you wouldn't mind, it would be much appreciated if you put in a ticket for that, so that we can make sure that that gets corrected. So any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves. Does the supplier automatically get the PO? Yes, so if they are set up for that, they will absolutely get an email, a notification, then they will log into their supplier portal and they'll be able to see the orders listed there. And that's where they can create those advanced shipping notices if they would like to, not something that's required, as a reminder. I don't want our suppliers to think that's something that they have to do. It would be nice, but again, it's not something that is required. It is optional. What other questions do we have about orders? Anything else? It's fine if you don't. Okay, awesome. We have another one. In order to process a partial receiving, you have to fully receive, then edit the receipt. So you're not fully receiving it. You're just going in and setting up basically the receipt header that we went over and saving it. And then you're going in to the line item and, yes, editing it in that sense, but you're not submitting the receipt before that happens. Does a confirming order go through an approval process? It does go through an approval process, and I think that that is determined at your entity level. And it might be a little bit different depending on what organization you belong to. Any other questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Is creating a return in eVA a requirement, or is it up to the entity? That is a good question, and I believe that that is more of a policy question depending on who is required to receive an eVA. So absolutely check with your eVA lead on that, and if they are unsure, they can check with their account executive. These are great questions, guys. Maybe you had your energy drinks today too, like I did. Or your coffee. I had both. This might be bad. Yes, it is a requirement. Okay, good to know. Thank you. Is it a requirement? And you guys can, we can talk about this a little bit later. Actually, I'll hold that for when we stop recording. But thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, you are required to create that receipt in the system under that executive order. I'm impressed that you know that right off the top of your head. Are there any other questions? If not, we will go into the last poll question that I have for us. Excellent. Okay, well, let's go into our last poll question. And let me launch this. So this last poll is, do you feel ready to use this functionality? You feel really confident? Do you feel like you need practice? Do you feel like you need to review resources? Again, there is no right answer here, but I'm hoping that you feel a little more confident after this particular session than you felt when you first joined, that you can see that it is a relatively simple process, and that even if you get lost, that the DPS team will be here for you. Post go live training will be here, and we will make sure that we get things cleared up for you, and so that you feel confident continuing to do those duties that you're used to doing in the system. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share our results. And as you can see, a lot of you are feeling confident, which is great. 6 out of 16 that participated in the poll. Then we have 10 that say they need to practice. Completely understandable and not a problem at all. Practice makes perfect, right? So we want to make sure that we are going in and making those transactions that we're used to making and feeling confident. And it might just be that the first couple feel a little weird, and then you'll start to really get the gist of it and get into the swing of things. So hopefully I have met your expectations for today's session. And before we stop the recording, I do want to talk about next steps. We do have a survey that's coming after we end this session that will automatically pop up on your screen. We also have additional training materials available on the learning management system. It is still March, but remember that starting next week in April, we will have the quick reference guides available, and those will be in the LMS, but they'll also be, which takes me to the next step, they'll also be available on the training websites. Make sure you continue to check that out for additional information. And finally, I always want to put in a plug for our awesome transition newsroom that Kim Brewer is so fantastic about keeping updated with all the latest and the greatest. So make sure that you check out that as well. And finally, just thank you for attending today. I hope that you found this helpful. And as a reminder, training will be around, support will be around. You are not going into this new system alone. There will be the DPS team, and I'm sure even your fellow teammates there to help you. So thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to end the recording.